Your high performers are the ones that making things happen, right?
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they don't complain, but they do watch, okay?
Yep, always.
And eventually, if things are not done on an even playing field, they'll end up leaving. Right?
Yeah.
And not because the work is hard, right? Because the system isn't fair, right? So I think it's very important. If you want a high performing culture, the new blueprint is reward performance, address underperformance, and apply the same standard to everyone.
You got it. Yeah. Because clarity builds confidence and consistency builds trust. And trusting teams are high performing teams.
Exactly. So look, remember, when standards drop, politics rise.
Yeah.
And we know how when politics rise, you can forget about it, right?
You're locked in to Burn the Blueprint podcast, where Tony Tidbit and Dr. Bridget Cooper challenge outdated rules and build smarter ways to lead. If you're ready for courage, clarity, and real talk, you're in the right place. All right, team, what blueprint are we burning today?
Hi, I'm Tony Franklin, also known as Tony Tidbit.
I'm Dr. Bridget Cooper, also known as Dr. B.
And welcome to Burn the Blueprint podcast,
where we break down outdated corporate playbooks, call out what's not working, and build smarter, stronger, people-centered systems that drive performance.
Absolutely. So, Dr. B, you ready?
Yeah. Got the lighter right here.
Yeah, I don't know why I ask you that every week, because I know you're ready, right? So I'm really happy about that, because we're burning something leaders don't want to admit, all right? And that is standards, or more specifically, the lack of them, right? And so, Dr. B, and you know this, you've been in corporate, you've been working with leaders in corporate for years. Every company says they believe in fairness. Every leader says they reward performance. Every organization claims they have standards. However, two people can do the same job at the same level with the same results and be treated completely differently. Different expectations, different feedback, different consequences. So at the end of the day, what's really going on? And so this is where we have to be honest, right? Most organizations don't operate on standards. They operate on preferences and feelings. Who you like, who you trust, who makes your life easier, you know that's right, and who challenges you and who doesn't. And over time, that inconsistency becomes culture. Because when people don't know what good looks like, they stop trying to reach it, which leads to a bigger question, Dr. B, and I want to ask you this.
Yeah.
Are leaders managing performance or just managing people based on how they feel?
Oh, and we can't say all managers, right? All leaders.
Correct.
However, I think there is a cancer that grows in organizations when there are these alignments of personality or temperaments that end up having some people treated according to the standard and other people treated according to what's easier that day. And you and I both know, we've talked about this in our Burn the Blueprint on performance evaluations, this idea of letting people get away with bad behavior to avoid conflict, to avoid hard discussions, to avoid being held accountable for not applying standards universally across the board. So all of this happens. So it comes down to, in a lot of ways, a reflection of what the culture already is, or a creation of the culture to begin with. And really, as a leader, you have to be very self-reflective on how are you participating in a culture that is either working or not working to be able to create the kind of performance that you're looking for from your organization. Because people are watching all the time. They're seeing
Absolutely.
What's fair, they're experiencing what they feel is fair, and they know.
And that's the thing, though, too. And look, you know, the old blueprint, and let's be fair, though, too, right? This is nothing new. This has been around. You stated earlier that it's not all leaders, which is true. That can be said for anything, right? But this is an area where people, you know, the old blueprint says, I know good work when I see it. It depends on the situation. Every person is different, right? And that's okay. But when expectations change, depending on the person, then you no longer have standards, right? And so the standards become unclear and the performance becomes subjective. And look, let's be fair too, because I want to dive into this and I want to get your
Absolutely.
expertise on this. But let's be fair though too, right? Leaders are human beings. Okay. And we all have biases. I don't care who you are, you have a bias, right?
Yep.
And I always equate this to you have a couple of daughters. Okay. I have kids. All right. And parents always say that I don't have a favorite, right? They're lying.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
At
have a
least in
favorite.
different circumstances,
No,
right?
you
Like,
love all your kids. No, but here's
Yeah,
the thing.
yeah, yeah.
You love your
Yeah.
kids, right? So
Right.
you would jump in front of a truck for each of them. Okay, if a truck jumped in front of you, your daughter was out in the street, one daughter was out in the street in a truck, you would jump in. The other daughter was out in the street, you would jump in. Everybody knows. So you definitely love your kids, but we do have favorites based on what we just got finished talking about. One kid is a headache, the other one's not. All right. One kid is a little bit like us from a personality standpoint. The other one's not. Right. And so that's a natural thing. And there's nothing wrong. Now, would you tell your kids that you had a favorite? Of course you don't. Right. But one kid, you gravitate to one kid more than you do the other. That's not a bad. And then that may change later in life. Okay.
Sure.
So that's just a human nature. Right. So you're going to have people where they have a team and they're like, this person is always complaining about everything. All right. And I say good morning and they're like, this is wrong. Right. And then this person just goes with the flow. All right. And at the end of the day, and so I get the part that we're all human and that we all need to be spoken to differently. We all process information differently. We all have different personalities. So I get all that. The challenge is when the standards change. So let's go back to the kids. You may have one kid that you favor, but if you're now letting that kid actually stay out later, than the other kid, right?
Oh,
or if you're
war is
punishing
gonna happen.
exactly. If you're punishing the one kid versus the other kid for the same situation, that's when you have a challenge. And that's what we're seeing in corporate America. Let me hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And by the way, if my daughters are watching, I don't have a favorite. You know that. I think that the favoritism can come up for whether it's an employee or a child in the kind of environment that you find yourself. So you have one favorite in the sense of, I just leave them alone and they go do the thing.
And they make it happen.
Right. And they make it happen. So I don't even need to talk to them. I don't care if they're crabby or if they're pleasant, whatever it is, they're off and they're doing this other thing. And then I have another person who I really get rewarded because they're always listening to my feedback and I'm helping them grow. So interactions can also be different. And depending on what your comfort level is for giving hard feedback or for guiding people toward a result or whatever your leadership acumen, strong point is, that can change across the people who are on your team. The issue also comes in though too, Tony, of different, sometimes we have, a team of people and they're all doing the same thing, but often they're not. They're one person's working on Project Alpha, one's working on Project Beta, one's working on Project Theta. And you might really love a project that someone's working on. So you give that person more time, more attention, and let them slide a little bit because you really love that project, So sometimes it isn't about the person. It can be about the kind of work that they're doing that resonates somewhat with you, that makes you feel better as a leader because you have more of a command of that area. And maybe another person doesn't get as much of your standards being held to them because they're not working on a thing that you're as interested in. So the standards shift sometimes with the interest level as well. We have to be really cautious and very aware of those tendencies as a leader.
Here's the thing though. So you said something a few minutes ago that everybody's watching. Okay.
Yeah, everybody.
And so let's just use that example where you got the project and, you tend to be more interested in that project because it's part of your expertise, right?
Yes. Giving more resources, you lean
hey, let's
in
make
more.
sure you got it, right? But then you got the rest of the team looking at that and they may be on another project, right? That at the end of the day, it's not your expertise, right? You're leaning more into them getting it done because of their strengths and the whole 9 yards, right? And then now they're seeing you giving Joe more time than you giving Sally.
Yeah.
That could be an issue. Okay.
Oh,
Now,
absolutely.
but here's the thing though. It can be an issue only if you have created, I don't want to say favoritism, but if you created different performance levels for different people all the time. If you're
Yes.
consistent in terms
Sure.
of how you evaluate your team, in terms
Yes.
of performance levels, regardless if you and Joe go out and have a drink after work,
Sure.
or you and
Sure.
Sally have lunch, right? Or whatever, or your kids are both in softball, okay, whatever the case may be, then it's not a big deal because the team knows at the end of the day, you're going to be consistent. And more importantly, you're going to evaluate them and your standards for each person is the same. And that's where the struggle is because the standard is not the same. And that's where people you lose. And then that's to the point of the culture. Now you created a culture where people like, I don't know what good is, right? Because I did the exact same thing as Sally, right? But I'm not getting the same love, right?
Yeah.
And I'm getting
And
this
that's,
from performance standpoint. Go ahead,
yeah.
Dr.
And
Neal.
that's the piece about the preferential project, et cetera. Like I have a couple clients that I've seen this happen with where one area, one division gets more bandwidth, gets more resources, gets more excused failures. You know, they kind of like, they just keep cobbling it together and trying to get it across the finish line in whatever way they can. Whereas other divisions are thinking, if you gave me half the resources you gave them,
So true.
and now when they fail, and they inevitably do, when we do that difference of standards and not holding them to the same, level set playing field, then when they go down, they bring the organization with them. And then everyone's like, if you just held us to the same standard, you would have known that was going to fail 9 months ago or 2 years ago. But now we're going to take budget cuts because that division failed. So it's not just about, how do people feel fair? It's bottom line driven. You have to understand that as a leader, when you have different standards for different people, different projects, different divisions, the entire organization will inevitably suffer at some point. You may not see it in the moment, but it's coming. And that's why we have to be really clear about how we're applying standards to individuals, to programs, to departments, to divisions, all of it.
Absolutely. And because the key is this, if your standards change depending on the person, they're not standards, they're preferences.
No. Yeah.
Okay. And so here's the thing though, we're talking about what they do. We're talking about the effect that it has on the organization, right? The question I have for you is why do leaders avoid setting real standards?
Well, we can do a playback of our performance reviews, burn the blueprint, but I think there's a lot of things that can be, and every situation is different, yet they have a lot of things in common. Oftentimes, leaders are not either empowered by the organization or have not had the experience themselves or have unwritten things going on in their own brains about delivering hard feedback. And especially when they create relationships with their team that are beyond supervisor, supervisee, and in this like very hard, rigid structure, they don't want to hurt feelings. They don't want to not give a big bump. They know they just had a baby or they just bought a house. So they want to give them that, extra bump in their performance appraisal. So they have to then back into that by giving them feedback that's consistent with a higher performance review so they can give them the money when that isn't how they are. So a lot of times.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Just hold that thought because
Okay.
I want you to finish. So let's just use that, right?
Yeah.
That happens. Number one, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
That happens, okay?
Right.
And that's part of the snowball
Yeah.
rolling down the hill and it becomes an avalanche. So just that little bitty thing right there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm afraid to tell Dr. B that, she's not doing what she needs to do because she just had a baby. Because I'm afraid to tell Joe that he's not doing this because I feel uncomfortable holding him accountable. All right.
Yeah.
In terms
Yeah.
of this. So I let it slide. I let
Yes.
this slide. I let that slide. And slowly but surely, as you start letting stuff slide, it starts becoming bigger and bigger. And then not only that, everybody sees it.
Yeah.
Right?
And then
they
if
don't
you try to hold
say
them
nothing.
accountable,
Go ahead.
you try to hold them accountable, and then they're coming back at you, whether it's with words or with a lawsuit.
Exactly.
Like pick your poison, right? Like it's either written by an attorney or it's, in conversation.
But then also, I might have forgot that I let this slide with Dr. B, right? So 5 months later, but they didn't forget.
No.
The people that saw it and continue to see it, they don't forget. So then to your point, they start throwing stuff and you're like, how did we get here? Because I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to show how that one small example, that afraid to have an uncomfortable conversation and holding people accountable can snowball into now preferences versus standards.
Yeah. And it goes also down into the team dynamic. So we know from the data that an engaged team is far more productive than an unengaged team, that people, when they are collaborating and they are trying to reach some sort of consensus or at least agreement on what it is that they want to move forward with, they work better. The bottom line benefits, all of it. The piece about this is that team dynamics, when they get ruffled, the entire team then is affected. So they have one person who's not being held to the same standards as everybody else, and they're seen as the favorite. That person will get ostracized. They didn't decide to get held to a different standard, but if the boss is doing that, they're going to be seen as the unicorn, and no horse wants to ride along with a unicorn. So it absolutely is. I mean, maybe there are some horses that like to ride with unicorns, but you liked it, right? But so that's the piece, is that it's not just about teaching one person and having the group watch it, but it's also about creating an experience within the team where the team is not working in tandem.
Absolutely. Yeah. So look, I mean, we could, and you're 100% right. Some of the old blueprints that we burnt up, definitely dive into this, right? Yeah. Because we're talking lack of training. Okay, in terms of how to have uncomfortable conversations, lack of creating and coming up with standards that are fair across the board, regardless if you feel close to one other or not, right? And then more importantly, the team dynamic as well, right? Because if the team feels that they perceived it as getting favoritism, then all of a sudden this is gone, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, what the new blueprint should look like, right? That's really defining expectations up front, communication, and then reinforcing them consistently, even when it's uncomfortable. Let's dive into that, Dr. B.
Yeah. And I think the other piece about it too is having a feedback loop. So often as leaders, we think we're doing the right thing, and we don't figure out that we're not doing the right thing, or it's not landing in the way that we're sending it, unless we ask in a feedback loop as to how it's landing. So making sure that you have open lines of communication with your team where they're going to call you out if they feel like standards are not being equitably delivered. And that piece is so incredibly important, because leaders have blind spots, and the only people sometimes who can bring those blind spots into the light are their team members or, a coach. But if they don't have a coach, they should get one. Anyway, shameless plug. So I think the piece, they have to see that there is this feedback loop that's necessary to be able to understand, are they doing this well? And getting that feedback from the team.
Can I tell a quick little story?
I love stories.
Okay, cool. So this reminds me, and especially when you're dealing with high performers, right? When you have high performers, sometimes you feel that, hey, they already got it, so I don't need to be involved with them, blah, 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 right? Especially as you have a lot of responsibility, you have a big team. So I remember this was years ago. I was in a situation where I had a huge team, and my high performers were kicking butt, right? And I was under the impression, this is what I thought. I'm like, I don't really need to do my one-on-ones consistently with my high performers. I need to really focus on, the other team members, right? And I just thought so I remember one-on-ones would come up and my team be like, my high performers would say, all right, Tony, hey, Jonathan, next week, buddy, you got it. Just if you need something, let me know, blah, 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 right? And then Natalie, hey, next week, don't worry, I blah, 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 right? And then goes right to your point about if you have open lines of communication, and then my team those individuals got mad at me. All right. And they were like, Tony,
Where's the love,
I need
Tony?
you. And where, blah, blah, blah. And that is like, you say that we have to be on these one-on-ones, but then you don't want to show up. And, I need you. And blah, blah, blah. And it blew me up because I thought that I was trying to take work off their plate. Right. Because I had so much, confidence in them. And they were like, no, I need the feedback. I need the feedback, Tony. I got stuff, blah, blah. So I learned a lot from that situation, right?
Yeah.
And so to your point, getting that feedback from your team, it was eye-opening for me. I didn't get mad, and I was like, oh my, and I apologize. I am sorry. Because I thought, and so those things, that consistency is very key.
Well, and what you're pointing out is that standards are not just standards on your team. It's standards for you as a leader.
Correct.
And you have to hold yourself to the same standard at 100%. And I have some high performers who are my coaching clients. And I'll tell you, when they don't get those one-on-ones, it sticks with them. They do not feel as valued. They do not feel as important. They feel like they have to be the squeaky wheel. Oh, I have to be a problem. I have to drop the ball. I have to do something messy in order for you to remember that I work for you. Where's the love here? So I think there is that piece of holding yourself as a leader to the same standard, one that you hold your staff to, but also that you have articulated as something that you can be held to that standard. Because if you're not doing that, the integrity is lost.
Absolutely. And look, let's be fair too, right? Your high performers are the ones that making things happen, right?
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they don't complain, but they do watch. Okay.
Yep, always.
And eventually, if things are not done on an even playing field, they'll end up leaving, right? Yeah. And not because the work is hard, right? Because the system isn't fair, right? So I think it's very important. If you want a high performing culture, the new blueprint is reward performance, address underperformance, and apply the same standard to everyone.
You got it. Yeah. Because clarity builds confidence and consistency builds trust. And trusting teams are high performing teams.
Exactly. So look, remember, when standards drop, politics rise.
Oh, yeah.
And we know how when politics rise, you can forget about it, right?
Yep,
so
absolutely.
If your team feels confused about what success looks like, the problem might not be your people. It might be your standard.
Absolutely. So I think we've had a really good time burning this blueprint. What do you think, Tony?
I think we did a really good job. So I think it's a wrap for this blueprint, right?
Oh my goodness. I think so too. I'm so excited for this.
And if this sparks something for you, share with a leader who's in review season right now.
Oh yeah. And join the movement. Tell us what blueprint you want us to burn next.
Because this is Burn the Blueprint podcast.
Where old systems get tossed.
And new ideas get built.
You got it. All right.
You ready to burn it, my sister?
Hello. All right. See you next time.
There we go. All right. You guys take care.